Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we're going to discuss the concept of theories of intelligence and multiple intelligence. But first, let's talk about what is human intelligence. So, the nature of the human intellect has fascinated scholars and became the subject of debates, studies, and propositions as early as during the time of the Greek philosophers. So try to imagine that the intellectual of human intelligence was already proposed during the time of Greek philosophers, which is the time of Plato and Aristotle. So, when the field of psychology began to emerge in the 17th and 19th centuries as a discipline separate from philosophy, mathematics, and biology, individuals such as John Locke, Charles Darwin, Francis Galton, and Charcot continued to influence the study of intelligence. However, current trends in intelligence theory and research involve the formation of more complex, multiple intelligence theories in which we will discuss or tackle it later. So, standardized tests to measure intelligence are used only as one of the sources of data about the mental ability. The fields of genetics and neurological research methodologies on the measurement of intelligence has generated a number of factors on the intelligence. In addition to mental ability, other data are considered simultaneously in determining the intelligence level of a person. So, while a big number of definitions of multiple intelligence have been published, there are seems to be no consensus or agreement on what intelligence actually is. According to Cattell in 1971, he defines that intelligence they kuno is a composite or combination of human traits which includes the capacity for insight into complex relationships and all of the process involved in abstract thinking and the capacity to acquire new capacity. Now, let's move on to the theories and definitions of intelligence. So, there are 9 theories of intelligence, but first, let's talk about the first theories of intelligence, which is the Binet-Simon scale in 1890. So, modern approach to understand the concept of intelligence began with the work of Alfred Binet, a French psychologist in 1857 to 1911, and his colleague Theodore Simon in 1873 and 1961. Binet and colleague Theodore Simon developed a series of tests designed to assess mental abilities rather than focused on learned information such as math and reading. Binet instead concentrated on other mental abilities such as the attention and the memory. Also, the scale they developed became known as the Binet-Simon Intelligence Scale. So, ang kani siya nga test kay was later revised by the psychologist Lewis Terman and became known as the Stanford Binet. So, while ang Binet's original intent kay gigamit to test the identified children who needed additional academic assistance, the test soon became a means to identify those deemed or feeble-minded by the eugenics movement. So, from Binet's work, ang term nga intelligence quotient or IQ na evolve siya. The IQ is the ratio of mental age to chronological age with 100 as the average. So, for example, if ang 8 years old makapas sa test nga pag 8 years old has an IQ of 100 which is the average for his or her chronological age. So, another example, no, kung ang 8 years old nga bata ay makapass siya sa test nga pang 10 years old has an IQ of 10 divided by 8 times 100. So, ma-result siya of 125. Hence, ang IQ ng bata is above the average for his or her chronological age, and he or she is brighter or more superior than other children on his or her age.
Spearman's two-factor theory of intelligence, 1904. Charles Spearman, a British psychologist, 1863 to 1945, advanced the two-factor theory of intelligence, G and S. Thus, the performance of any intellectual act requires some combination of G, or general factor, which is available to the same individual to the same degree of all intellectual acts, and of S, or specific factors, which are specific to that act and which varies in strength from one act to another. The theory explains that if one knows how a person performs on one task that is highly saturated with G, one can safely predict a similar level of performance for another highly G saturated task. Prediction of performance on tasks with high S factor is less accurate. Nevertheless, since G pervades all tasks, prediction will be significantly better than chance. Thus, the most important information to have about a person's intellectual ability is an estimate of his G. Examples of Spearman's two-factor theory. For example, the student's performance in mathematics could be due to his general intelligence and his specific numerical abilities, i.e., G plus S1. Similarly, in literature, it may be because of G plus S2 factors, and in science, it may be because of G plus S3, and so on. Advantages of two-factor theory. G can be objectively measured and defined by an IQ test. G is a good predictor of school performance.
Thurman Stanford Binet Individual Intelligence Test in 1906. Lewis Madison Thurman, an American cognitive psychologist, on 1877 to 1956, published a revised and perfected Binet-Simon scale for American population in 1906 while he was at Stanford University. In 1916, he adopted William Stern's suggestion that the ratio between mental and chronological age be taken as unitary measure if intelligence multiplied by 100 to get rid of the decimals. The resulting intelligence quotient became known as the IQ. The classic formula for the IQ is IQ equals mental age divided by chronological age times 100. By far, the Thurman Stanford Binet Individual Intelligence Test is considered as the best available individual test of intelligence, or the Stanford Binet Intelligence Scales, or more commonly, the Stanford Binet, is an individual administered intelligence test that was revised from the original Binet-Simon scale by Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon. The Stanford Binet Intelligence Scale is now in its 5th edition, which was released in 2003. It is a cognitive ability and intelligence test that is used to diagnose developmental or intellectual deficiency in young children. The test measures 5 weighted factors and consists of both verbal and non-verbal subtests. The 5 factors being tested are knowledge, quantitative reasoning, visual spatial processing, working memory, and fluid reasoning.
Edward L. Thorndike, an American psychologist on 1874 to 1949, and his students used objective measurements of intelligence on human subjects as early as 1903. So during the 1920s, he developed a multi-factored test of intelligence that consisted of completion, arithmetic, vocabulary, and directions test, or CAV-D. So Thorndike drew an important distinction among three broad classes of intellectual functioning. The first one is abstract intelligence, that is measured by standard intelligence test; mechanical intelligence, which is the ability to visualize relationships among objects and understands how the physical world works; and the last one is the social intelligence, which is the ability to function successfully in interpersonal situations. Thorndike proposed that abstract intelligence has four dimensions, namely altitude, or the complexity of difficulty of tasks one can perform; the width, or the variety of tasks of a given difficulty area, which is the function of width and altitude; and then the speed, which is the number of tasks one can complete in a given time. He also cited for his work on what he considered as the two most basic intelligences, the trial and error and stimulus response association. His proposition stated that stimulus response connections that are repeated are strengthened, and while those that are not used are weakened.
Stimulus response theory developed from early conceptions of conditioning, a behavioral process whereby a response becomes more frequent or more predictable in given environment as a result of reinforcement. So in the early 1990s, American psychologist Edward L. Thorndike argued that the probability that a particular stimulus will repeatedly elicit a particular response depends on the perceived consequences of the response. According to this view, new stimulus-response connections are strengthened only if the response is followed by certain kinds of consequences. Thorndike's law of effects finds less general acceptance today, largely because it became unclear whether an animal's responses were sometimes or even always modified by their consequences, since other factors could be present. Insight into how organisms respond to various stimuli which may occur through conscious or subconscious processing. So it's valuable in addressing behavior related phenomena and in guiding learning of new behaviors. Behavior often is a reflection of the way in which stimuli influence internal factors such as sensation and emotion, and may be further determined by individual experiences, including early life experiences and observed experiences. In the process of learning or changing behavior, establishing new associations between stimuli and responses is fundamental. Indeed, observable and measurable changes in behavior typically result from controlled changes in an individual's environment that allow for novel responses to pre-existing stimuli.
Thurston Multiple Factors Theory of Intelligence in 1938. Louis L. Thurston was an American psychometrician in 1887 to 1955 who studied intelligence tests and tests of perception through factors analysis. His theory stated that intelligence is made up of several primary mental abilities rather than a general factor and several specific factors. His multiple factors theory of intelligence identified to seven primary mental ability. First, the verbal comprehension. It is mean that measured by tests such as vocabulary and reading comprehension, and it is the ability to understand the verbal analysis. The second is word fluency. The word fluency, it is measured by tests such as the one that requires the production of words beginning with the particular letter. And the third will have the number facility. The number facility is made accuracy of computation, solving simple arithmetic word problems. And the fourth will have the spatial visualization. This one is the ability to look at a two-dimensional figure and visualize what it would look like expanded into three dimensions. And the five will have the associate memory. It is the ability to require generalization, reasoning from the specific to the general. It is the ability to remember words or objects presented in pairs. And the sixth is perceptual speed. This ability defines the number of the time specific letter or appears, and it is involved the proofreading and in writing letters and numbers. And the last one, we will have the reasoning. In this reasoning, it is the ability to solve arithmetic and logical problem. According to L. Thurston theory, he explained that people possess different types of verbal abilities.
Number 6. Cattell's theory on fluid and crystallized intelligence. According to Raymond B. Cattell, a British-American psychologist, 1905 to 1998 theorized that there are two types of intelligence. The first one is the fluid intelligence. It described as the ability to develop techniques for solving problems. It included problems that are new and unusual, generally from perspective of problem solver. This intelligence is based on spatial and visual imagery. This type of intelligence is more dependent of psychological structure or parts of the brain that are responsible for intellectual behavior. It increases until adolescent, then goes through a plateau and begins to gradually decline with a generation of brain psychological structure. For example, while writing an exam, a question has words that are different from your textbook. It is your fluid intelligence that figures out the question is regarding a topic studied. It can be measured by the test of problem solving, block design, spatial evaluation. And the second one is the crystallized intelligence. It refers to the ability to use previously acquired knowledge for problem solving. In fact, it is often culturally defined. In addition, it shows the individual problem-solving method to view the current problem. It is the base of reasoning, problem-solving, and verbal skills. It is not dependent on one's neurological development. This type of intelligence is function one's acquired experiences and stock knowledge. In addition, an individual educational attainment. For example, when it comes to remembering answer to a question in exam and it presenting in necessary format, your crystallized intelligence is at work. It can be measured through the test of general knowledge, use of knowledge vocabulary, wide variety of acquired knowledge.
Guilford's A Theory on the Structure of the Intellect in 1967, J.P. Guilford, or also known as Joy Paul Guilford, an American psychologist, advanced a general theory of human intelligence whose major application or use is for edu- educational research, personal selection and placement, and the education of gifted and talented children. The theory of the structure of the intellect, or SOI, advances that human intelligence is composed of 180 separate mental abilities, that the initial count was 120. that have been identified through factor analysis. And Guilford stated that the mental abilities are composites of three separate dimensions, which are the contents, operations, and products. So the contents have four types. These are figural, or the properties of stimuli experienced through the senses. And these senses are visual, auditory, olfactory, gustatory, and kinesthetic. For example, shapes and forms, sizes, colors, sounds, tastes, temperature, and density and volume. The second type of content is symbolic or letters, numbers, symbols, designs. Next is semantic or words and ideas. And then the last is behavioral or the actions and expressions of thoughts and ideas. And the five kinds of operations are cognition or the ability to gain, recognize, and discover knowledge. The next is memory or the ability to retain, store, retrieve, and recall the contents of thoughts. Then the divergent production or the ability to produce a variety of ideas or solutions to a problem. Next is convergent production or the ability to produce a single best solution to a problem. And evaluation or the ability to render judgment and decide whether the intellectual contents are correct or wrong or good or bad. Next is the six kinds of products, which are units that come in single number, letter, or word. Then next is classes or a higher order concept, for example, men and women equals people. Then the third kind of product is the relation or the connections between and among classes and concepts. Then the systems or the process of ordering or classification of relations. Then we have the transformation, which is the process of altering or restructuring of intellectual content. And the last one is implication, which is the process making inferences from separate pieces of information. Then the next is the figure 34, which is the Guilford structure of intellect that consists of the three separate dimensions, namely the contents, operations, and products. So, muna siya now sa um, theory ni Guilford. So, Guilford developed a wide variety of psychometric tests to measure the specific mental abilities predicted by the theory. So the tests provided the operational definitions of the mental abilities that is proposed by the theory. So these are the examples that illustrate the three closely related abilities that differ in terms of operation, content, and product. So the first one is the evaluation of semantic units or the EMU, that is measured by the ideational fluency tests in which respondents are asked to make judgments about concepts. So for example, which of the following objects best satisfies the criteria hard and round? An iron, a button, a tennis ball, or a light bulb. Then the second one is the divergent production of semantic units or DMU that would require the respondent to list all the items he or she can think of that are hard and round. So the last one is the divergent production of symbolic units or DPU involves a different content category. For example, list all the words that end in shon. So it can be any word as long as nag-end siya og shon. So next is the theory of Sternberg's, which is the triarchic theory of intelligence in 1982. So Robert Sternberg of Yale University theorized that intelligence is a fixed capacity of a person. So the person with higher intellectual capabilities, as in the case with children and youth, who are gifted and talented in almost every task that can be achieved at a high level of performance, the capabilities that underlie intelligence will enable a highly intelligent child at an age to do better than his peers or age mates. And the intellectual abilities must increase with age given the supportive environment and effective teaching learning conditions. So, the theory of intelligence seeks to explain the integrative between the relationship the relationship between the first is intelligence and the internal world of the individual, that the mental mechanisms that underlie intelligent behavior, and then the intelligence and external world of the individual, or the use of these mental mechanisms and everyday life in order to attain an intelligent fit to the environment. And the next is the intelligence and experience, or the mediating rule of one's passage through life between the internal and external worlds of the individual. So, Sternberg calls his theory triarchic because intelligence has three main parts or dimensions, which is the contextual part, an experiential part, and a componential part. So the contextual intelligence emphasizes intelligence in its social cultural context. Thus intelligence for a child requires adaptive behavior that is not required for an older person. So say for example, it may be stated that intelligence for a Filipino child, especially those who are deprived of the basic needs, requires adaptive behavior that is not required of an American child. Or it can be that the intelligence for children in rural areas requires adaptive behavior not required for children who live in urban areas. So, persons um, who are high on the contextual dimension of the intelligence quickly recognize what factors influence success on various tasks. So they are adept at both adapting, adapting to, and shaping their environments so that they can accomplish their individual goals. So the second one is the experiential intelligence. So experiential intelligence emphasizes the insight and the ability to formulate new ideas and combine seemingly unrelated facts or information. And so Stenberg also emphasizes the rule of experience. So he says that the habitual highly practiced ways of dealing with the environment are not the true indicators of intelligence. Rather, it is the way a person responds to an event that is new, novel, and even unexpected, that shows how smart he or she is. And then the componential intelligence. So this intelligence emphasizes the effectiveness of information processing. So he also defines component as the underlying cognitive mechanisms that carry out the adaptive behavior to novel situations. So, the cognitive mechanisms are equivalent to the skills, knowledge, and competencies that a person would have acquired mainly through education and experience. So there are two kinds of components. The the performance components and the meta components. So performance components are used in the actual execution of the test. So they include encoding, comparing, chunking, and triggering actions and speech, while the meta components are the higher order executive processes used in planning, monitoring, and evaluating one's working memory program. So Sternberg also has identified the six significant metal components. So as he emphasized time and again that meta components form the basis for developmental changes and intelligence. So it all activation and feedback are filtered through these elements, and if they do not perform their function well, then he said that it will not matter very much. So the first is the recognition of what has to be done, understanding the task at hand. Second one is the recognition of what has to be done, understanding the task at hand, and selecting performance components and encoding important features of a task. Next is selecting an appropriate mental representation, visually or verbally. Then, organizing performance components by formulating plans for organizing and sequencing the steps or procedures in the process. And next is the deciding how to allocate attention and resources, and deciding how to allocate attention and resources and monitoring one's performance. So Sternberg states that persons who are high in componential intelligence do very well in abstract thinking, that are able to process information, and effectively they think analytically, critically, and creatively.
Now, let's move on to the last theory, which is the Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence in 1983. Based on the studies of many people from different walks of life in everyday circumstances and professions, he developed his breakthrough theory of multiple intelligence. Howard Gardner first proposed the theory of multiple intelligence in his 1983 book Frames of Mind, where he broadens the definition of intelligence and outlines several distinct types of intellectual competencies. And also, Gardner developed a series of 8 inclusion criteria while evaluating each candidate intelligence that was based on the variety of scientific disciplines. Gardner also writes that we may all have these intelligences, but our profile of this intelligence may differ individually based on the genetics or experience.
Linguistic intelligence. Linguistic intelligence is the ability to use language to excite, please, convince, stimulate, or convey information. The indicators of linguistic intelligence are manifested by persons who ask a lot of questions, particularly why and what if questions, have a good vocabulary, enjoy talking, can spell easily. pick up new language easily, bilingual, trilingual, etc. Enjoy playing with words, word games, word puzzles, and rhymes. Enjoy reading, love stories, jokes, and riddles. Like to write and also can talk about language skills.
So, the second one is the logical mathematical intelligence, in which it is the ability to analyze situations or problems logically, identify solutions, conduct scientific research, and easily solve logical or mathematical operations. It is also one of the eight multiple intelligence types proposed by Howard Gardner. Just like the other intelligence types, characteristics of logical or mathematical intelligence can be easily observed in people. Basically, these individuals are good at mathematical operations. Recognizing, reasoning, and analyzing the problems are easy for them. Characteristics of the people who have these intelligence types are: first, excellent at thinking about their numbers, patterns, and their relationship. Second one is great at solving complex math, word problems, and computations. The third one is to tend to do scientific experiments and like to think about abstract ideas. And also exceptional analyzing skill and maximum organizational and classification abilities. There are most common logical mathematical intelligence examples that are familiar with us. First, kanang a child ganahan mo play og chess, strategic games, suitable card games for kids, and also kanang math games that are and is successful at them. The second one is that kanang tao nga interesado mubasa og mga detective novels and malingaw lantaw og mga watching crime fiction movies. The third one, kanang mga students who likes to do scientific experiments and solve math problems and likely to get high scores on math past test papers. And also, kanang mga students can happily spend his or her time with these subjects like electronics, accounting, logic, and many more. Also, a person enjoys planning an event and organizing its budget with the use of graphs and etc. And lastly, katong mga negosyante that are willing to take risk in the stock market. Kani siya mga tao kay successfully manage his or her investments. So, moto siya ang mga lain-laing klase o mga lain-laing example sa logical mathematical intelligence.
Bodily kinesthetic intelligence. This intelligence refers to the ability to use fine and gross motor skills in sports and performing arts or arts and crafts production. So the individual that the indicators of this component of the multiple intelligences, they are observed among the persons who, first one is, have a good sense of balance, good eye and hand coordination. They have a sense of rhythm, graceful in movement, and they can communicate ideas through gestures, body movements, and facial expressions that read body language. And have early is in more manipulating objects and toys. So they can manipulate objects and toys, and they can solve problems through doing. So these are the following. The next is the activities that develop by bodily kinesthetic intelligence, such as role playing, dramatization, skits, mimes, body language, gestures, facial expressions, dancing, sports, games, experiments, laboratory work. So the persons also who are successful in the following professions that have a high bodily kinesthetic intelligence are those ballet and folk dancers, choreographers, sculptors, professional athletes, gymnasts, surgeons, calligraphers, jewelers, watchmakers, carpenters, and circus performers. Then the fourth type of intelligence is the spatial intelligence. So spatial intelligence is the ability to perceive and mentally manipulate a form or object, perceive and create tension, balance, and composition in a visual or spatial display. So there are some indicators of this aspect of MI that are manifested by the persons who like to draw or doodle, sketch, or persons who have a keen eye for detail and like to take things apart, and and they like to build things and have a good sense of relating parts to the whole, and they enjoy puzzles, riddles, and can remember places by description or image. They can interpret maps and enjoy orienteering mechanic that can mechan and they can mechanically adapt. So some of the activities that enhance spatial intelligence are illustrations, constructions, maps, paintings, drawings, mosaics, sketches, cartoons, sculptures, storyboards, and videotapes. So, the persons who are successful in the following professions that have a high special intelligence is the urban planners, architects, engineers, surveyors, explorers, navigators, mechanics, curators, map designers, fashion designers, florists, interior designers, visual artists, muralists, photographers, movie directors, set designers, chess players, and cartoonists. Then the fifth kind of intelligence is the musical intelligence. So from the word itself, musical, so it is the ability to enjoy, perform, or compose a musical piece. So the indicators of musical intelligence are shown by persons who have sensitivity to sound patterns. The that patterns hum or move rhythmically. So that capture the essence of a beat and adjust movement patterns according to changes, and can have that they have a good sense of pitch, can hum tunes, and can discriminate among sounds. They can play with sounds, remember tunes, and sound patterns. So persons who succeed in the following occupations that have a high musical intelligence are the composers, musicians, conductors, critics, opera artists, singers, rappers, instrument makers and players, sound recording sound recording artists. Then then we have the interpersonal intelligence. So interpersonal intelligence is the ability to understand and get along with others. So the end dictators of this component of the multiple intelligences are observed in persons who can demonstrate and who have empathy towards others, feels feel so much for others, then they are sensitive to the feelings of others. They act as mediator or counselor to others. They can relate well to peers and adults, like to be with other people, and they are admired by peers, make friends, and they can make friends easily. They display skills of leadership, can work cooperatively with others, and enjoy cooperative and group activities. So, the types of activities that will develop interpersonal intelligence include group projects, group projects and charts, communication, social interaction, dialogues, conversations, debates, arguments, consensus building, group work on murals and mosaics, round robins, games, challenges, and sports. So the people who succeed in the fields of endeavor that have a high interpersonal intelligence, these are the teachers, social workers, doctors, doctors and nurses, anthropologists, counselors, priests or ministers, nuns, entrepreneurs, ombudsmen, managers, politicians, salespersons, and tour guides.
Number 7. Interpersonal intelligence. It defined as the capacity for self-reflection, to be aware of strengths and weaknesses, feelings, thought, process that constitute self-knowledge. Interpersonal intelligence helps people differentiate their emotions to build mental models of themselves while making decisions regarding to their lives. Although it is sometimes thought, it is essential to note that interpersonal intelligence is not defined by the person's preference for working alone or isolations. So, there are 8 indicators of this element of multiple intelligence are evidenced by people who, number 1, are goal-oriented, develop plans carefully. Number 2, are aware of their strengths, weaknesses, and confident of their own abilities and accept their limitation. Number 3, are self-regulating and self-directing, do not need to be told what to do. Number 4, motivate themselves to engage in projects. Number 5, work toward achievement of one's goal. Number 6, express preference for particular activities. Number 7, communicate their feelings. Number 8, engage in creative thinking, novel and original ideas. Keep hobbies, productive pursuit, and diaries.
Naturalist intelligence. So, what is the naturalist intelligence? It is the most recent addition to the original list of 7 multiple intelligences. The naturalist intelligence refers to the person's ability to identify and classify patterns in nature. So the naturalist intelligence, they have the ability to identify and classify or manipulate elements of the environment, objects, animals, and plants. In prehistoric times, peoples relied on hunting animals and gathering plants. Naturalist intelligence was used to sort what animals and plants were edible or not. At present, a person uses his or her natural intelligence is the ways where he or she relates to the environment. A person who was naturalist intelligence ability is likely sensitive to the changes in flora and fauna, weather patterns, and similar environmental factors. When can we say that a child has a naturalist intelligence? The child has a naturalist intelligence. It can be stimulated in the classroom activities such as creation of habitats. The child show cares for animals and plants, classifying objects and organisms, and they love collecting.